up. Lots of seats right in the middle. I need to start with a couple of birthday announcements tonight. I apologize for missing Elisa Faison's birthday yesterday, but happy birthday, Elisa. And then rumor is that today is both Amanda Bausch and Margot Lipsy's birthday. Happy birthday. Van runs tomorrow. Immediately following lunch, meet at 1 o'clock in front of the Sewanee Inn, and Adam Vines will drive you to Monteagle to pick up anything you need. And he'll go again the next day. So if you have workshop tomorrow, don't go tomorrow, wait and go the next day. The open mic tonight is, 1 o'clock. Is that what I said? Okay, 1 o'clock. Open mic is on at the pub tonight, so please come hear your scholar friends. And speaking of the pub, I got a long email from the pub manager in the middle of the night last night asking me to remind you that yes, you really do need your ID. It doesn't matter how many years past 21 you are, you still have to show him an ID, and no, you are not allowed to bring other drinks to the pub. So please follow these guidelines. He's very concerned about losing his license. I meant to tell a joke about getting carded. Where is he? But mine wouldn't have been anywhere near as good as yours. Adam.
Oh, Adam. The raffle. First, we're going to give away Christine Schutt's Prosperous Friends, and that is number 34. You don't remember your numbers? That's me. Lauren Clark. And Charles Martin's Signs and Wonders. Rebecca Spears. You say it. You say it. You're so important.
1, 2, 3. Christine Schutt.
Thank you very much. It's very nice to be here again. I want to thank Wyatt, of course, and the wonderful, wonderful staff and all the friends I've made, and in terms of teachers and students and people who have gone on to write books. You all will. I'm going to read something old and something new, an old story and a new story. I don't think I've ever read this old story before, and the reason I feel comfortable enough to read it here is because you are all kind and forgiving, and you don't necessarily expect me to be nice. So one of my sons said to me, "It's sad, Mom. Think of it that way." All right, this is the old story. It's called You Drive. She brought him what she had promised, and they did it in his car on the top floor of the car park, looking down onto the black, flat roofs of buildings, and she said, or she thought she said, "I like your skin," when what she really liked was the color of her father's skin, the mottled white of his arms and the clay color at the roots of the hairs along his arms. Long hair along his arms. It was hair bleached from sun and water, sun off the lake, and all that time he spent in water, summer to summer, braiding the wild, dry hair on his head, turning the ends of his hair, which was also red, and deeply so, quite white. "You look healthy," she said to her father, and he did, in high color, but the skin on his face also seemed coarse to her, not boy skin, her father's, not glossy, close-grained skin, but pitted and stubbled under all that color, rashed along his jaw and neck, her father's skin, rough. She touched him, and it was rough skin, his cheek. Just testing, she said, and smiled at her father. Shaving, she said, I used to watch mother's guys at it. Her father said, my youngest daughter still. Then he took hold of her hand and kissed it. He was quiet, holding her hand against his leg and looking out at a roof where a fat woman waited for her dog. Her father was quiet. What a dirty place this is, he said. That poor dog is ashamed of himself. Look at my hands, she said. I have seen lots of things. Changing the sheets of incontinent patients on rounds made twice a night, all of them up anyway, these old howlers, mean and balked and full of worry. The naked woman with her pocketbook is crying after baby while the farmer at the nurse's station slaps the counter for a drink. Where the fuck, the farmer says over and over. You should know this about me, she said to her father. I can take care of myself. So tell me what you have seen, her father said, and she told him about her mother and the guy with the criminal haircut. Can you imagine, she asked her father, imagine the two of them inviting her in after, turning over the pillows and fanning at their chests by lifting up the sheet. And there was more, she said, a lot more, but it was her father's turn. You promised, she said. The wife. The wife. The wife has see-through skin and grainy eyelids bruised by nature. When she wakes, there's all this sand between her lashes. Daughters, too. There are brown and knobby daughters, dozens of them, scotch taping bangs and walking through the house in their underwear. She told her father. A girl had kissed her once, and not a girl really, but a woman, a teacher, a small, dark, trembly woman who followed all the games at school, running herself breathless up and down the playing field. How did it feel, her father asked, to kiss a woman? I don't remember, she said. The woman turned teacherly and took me by the shoulders. You are such a show-off, T said. You are vain. You are braggy. She told her father about these girls she knew who were in love with each other. They let her watch them kiss at the lake after swimming. Their kissing was not so dry or hard-seeming as the kissing she remembered with her teacher, and she spoke of the blonde abundance of the girl, curled outside a high-cut suit. But there was so much smoke in the car. By then, she did not know if she imagined the square and heavy ends of her father's fingers, or if she saw or had hold of his fingers, of the horrid, dead white ends of his fingers, tips weighted as surely as a line-deep fishing plummet of fat in the black green water. What was that thing he said he caught? Lifted out of the water and beating against her as it had, the fish curling and uncurling in the heat of her hand. Did it have a name? Tell me about your boyfriends, her father said. Her father asked, who else besides the character T who gets you this stuff? Just the character, she said, and she called the character T because she didn't want to give him a name. A name could get them all in trouble. T is just a hairless boy, doesn't need to shave, she said. Same age, but not her size. Smaller, prettier. T had a lean girl's face, sharp angles, good bones. The hammocked skin underneath his eyes fluttered when he kissed. "I look," she said. Her father kissed her, his dry lips slack against her own and soft, gentle enough this time. She could have looked, but she was shy, ready to move in what ways he moved, toward her or away, a lot depending on the things she brought him. That is what she thought, at least. That is what she told him, but her father said, No. Her father said, "My problem is, I'm tired." Another boy, another car. She used to let him feel her up just so long as she could sleep. The night shift, she said to her father, is such a bitch. You're always tired. I can't talk, she said, and she kissed her father. She opened her mouth to him and worried her hand inside his coat and felt the warm damp of his shirt, the hard back and heat of her father. Here was no girl, boy, but heavy muscle and bone, soft, wide shoulders, and something like breasts. She liked to push against and rub her face against her father's breast. She rubbed her face in him, lemons and gin and earth and smoke. His springy hair was in her teeth, everywhere, springy and fragrant and wet and tasting of nails. Yes, the metals in my mouth, she said, are singing. She told T she couldn't remember where she had parked her car. That was why she was late, she told T. This was another time she couldn't remember. They had driven around and around, she and her father, looking for the street. Honest, she said. But T didn't believe her, and he put his hand in under her skirt to prove it. T said, "You are so fucking easy to get at," which she supposed was true. The way she dressed, the way she velcroed shut, ready to unravel at a tab for a boy, any boy, or that was what T said. "I can see through your dress," T said. "I know what you've been doing." Under the watchful eye of a man whose name she did not now remember, she took off her skinny bra. He only wanted to look, the man said, and touch her. Just a little. "You'd like my mother," she said to the man. "You should see my mother." "Should I be ashamed?" she asked her father. The lady and her dog were gone. Only skin-colored fence acted guardrail on a road. No view. "Of what?" he said. "Third party to things, watching, scattering other women's charms like seed and clucking in a backward shuffle was how she saw herself, asking, 'Do you like that woman? Did you see her breasts?' Her father said, 'I like your breasts.' Full, snub-nosed breasts, nipples tightened to the size of quarters in the cold. She liked these breasts too, and girls with boy chests and ribs showing through, which wasn't the way she was made, or maybe it was. She wasn't sure, even though she looked when she was being touched. She knew these feelings, the damp press and hurtful weight of a man's head against her collar, beard, no beard. She had known this. "Everyone else," she told her father, "seems to have what I want." Her father said, "My daughters are the same. Spoiled girls. They were using Daddy's credit cards to clean beneath their nails, asking, 'Can we? Why don't we? We should.'" Her father said, "I don't think of you that way." And he pressed the heel of his hand against her hip as he might to push away, to push off, hard body arched, moving stiffly in the cold waters just off the rocks. The summer houses were shut up for the winter, November, midday, and the black lake level against the yellow shore. We could go there, her father said, but they stayed put in his car and used the things she brought. T said, even your mother wants it. And she was surprised. T said, come on, everything you fucking do on that night shift job is crooked. What do you do, she asked her father, when you're not with me? He said, you don't really want to know. And he drove her to an unfinished place and pointed, I have something to do with that. She saw a building, girders, rags, nets, menacing vacancies. Her father pointed, nobody home, he said, but that's not my job. Rocking the car easy over the scrub-board road, raising dust, her father said, we'll never get this thing finished. Dust settling on the canvas shapes, dumpsters and cinder block, the whole wild modern array of it. Amazing, amazing, she said to her father, looking out the window and back at him, the whiteness of his collar against the blaze of neck, the creases dark and almost black. At his throat he wore a tie knotted tight as a knuckle. Maybe he draws the buildings. Maybe he warehouses nails and joints, figure-8 pieces, metal supports. Who knows? The way her father palmed the wheel of his fat car, he might very well be a crook with a crook's car. Much like an office, plush and neutral, her father's make coppery glitter and paneling that might or might not be real wood, black and gold buttons for everything, the music on the radio, never clearer. Only decide, please, you pick. No, you was the way she was with her father. First word, always, yes, to everything he asked about. Yes, I did. Yes, I will. Yes, when he surprised her coming up almost to her house and pointing to a shut eye. Do you believe my wife did this? He asked, the good eye blinking and teary and strained. Can you come out with me for just a while? Yes, Dad. The name warmed her every time she used it to his face, so that she rarely used this name or any other to his face. Instead, she signaled him. She gave directions in the way she touched him, sometimes saying, you, and you. When she was tired and wanted to let him know she would, all he had to do was ask. But not tonight. Tonight, she wasn't feeling well. But yes, she said to her father. She was always saying yes to her father. Only when she was away from him did she wonder, does this make sense? My father driving all the way to her and home again and to her again in a night, driving to where she worked and waiting for her in the lot until the morning. Did her father make sense? Twice in a night it happened. She said to T, I get confused. She said, but I like what I am doing. I wanted to be in something hard. I wanted to be up all night. You're so fucking out of it, T said, and all the other boys said too. How do you know one man from another? The heavy-lidded eyes, the brittle hair and color of her father. First off, these things. And his voice, she knew, the juicy sweetness of his voice when her father was drinking, the way even the words came unbuttoned, the way he said her name. She could be done in, by this much about him. Also, the money he gave her. And why not? Presents between the covers of oversized matches, don't strike in gold from Oh Something's bar. Are these from us? She asked her father, holding up matches. Have we been here? You, she said, in the car again, free to speak and ready, even her earlobes oiled, every part of her clean and clean. She could get off looking at and petting the hair on her arms. I don't understand, she said. What are you doing with a wife who beats you? Oh, her father said, and he was sad, or he was tired. Hard to give it up. The look out onto water, someplace to go, neighbors far apart on either side, not seen until the winter, then sighted in the forked spaces, women standing at windows, waiting to be seen. But it's hard to see them, her father said. The glare hurts my eyes, and the bog of common plants, the sappy, heart-shaped, greeny danglers, beads the windows. Nothing happens besides, he said. I don't know why the wife's jealous. She said, the light in rooms like that puts me to sleep. I know the daughters, she said, from schools in summer. She knew them diving for soap chips in the boathouse. She and the daughters playing to know what it felt like. The winner held the soap between her legs the longest. Oh, yes, she remembered everything about this game, the way it ticked inside of her. I wanted to melt down soap, she said. But all of us girls got to play. We all got to fold our hands over the burning part. They switched places. Her father tipped the seat and shut his eyes. She said, I'm my mother's daughter. I want more than others. The way it was for her to wake up in the morning. The reason you think you've been here is you've been here. I don't want it the same, she said. Everyone I know is broke. The night shift doesn't pay shift. My boyfriends never work. And your mother? Her father asked when she had already told her stories, grandfather and uncles making house calls on her mother and scolding the poor woman before they made it better. Every day less charmed by her mother, opening their wallets, saying, this has got to stop. There's only so much we can take. Do you remember at all? Do you remember her at all? She said. Nothing has changed. Her father said, I can't get excited when I think about your mother. I'm shivering, she said, and he was too. She could see the cold in his shoulders and in her arms, resting on his shoulders, and both of them, she and her father, white, blue-white, November still, and the horizon cindered, thin, burnt out, quite black. She put her bare foot against the car door window and said, look at my leg. No color sky, battered grasses. After a while, she asked, is this doing anything for you? Her father smiled. He said, I've had better, which made her laugh, his saying, when what did he know? Just ask me how many times, she said. I couldn't tell you. She said, I'm always in love with someone. Her father said he meant it. He was tired, and she put her hands on his face to feel the bristle grown in, driving just to get away, a day, a night, another day, as he said. We don't have to do anything, she said. Her father asked her, do you think I look young, or do you think I look like some old guy who got his eyes done cheap? Look at my feet, she said, parked near the boat launch to a lake they don't know, iced over, gray-white, no clear shoreline. Look at the footmarks I've left on the window. Such white feet, her father said. Have I told you this before? She asked. But T didn't answer, bapping pencils against her head and dancing to his made-up music. Her father said, find some music. Not that. No, not that. No. Then he forgot about the music or was indifferent to it. She could stop at anything she liked. But do you like it? She asked her father. Do you like this dress? She asked. These shoes? Her father said, it's hard for me to see. My eye still hurts. So she drove again, and she told her father what it was as they passed it, and in what connection to him were these women at the end of narrow drives in houses near the water. She spoke of aproned Anns and pretty Susies. You knew them, she told her father. Her father said, did I? I don't miss many people. She said, I don't understand how you can stay with a wife who beats you. There, running after her father down the hallway in his story, was a small woman with a small head and a racket in her hand. Why did he stay with this woman, she wanted to know, and he never answered her, or not that she remembered. What could he have answered besides, married to a woman such as this, marigoldy hair and bright mouth? After all those daughters, the wife still blushed. Some sweet name it was, flicked loose from the roll. A Kathy, a Jane, ring guards clanking on her wedding finger. She said, you should live with me. She said, maybe you don't want to know this, but it doesn't take much. She was talking numbers. 2 and 3 a week, once that many in a day. And I'm not very big, she said. A bigger woman could take more. Once, here at the park, she said, driving her father slowly through the main streets of the town, pointing out where she had been. Here, the last time, with some doper, boots and lots of hair, the two of them on the roof overlooking the entire fucking wayward county. She said, oh, Dad. Anyone with what we had could have seen everything, too. Mother and one of her guys in her Mustang or her Bronco, the woman turning in cars as fast as she did, men, grandfather and the uncles honking close behind. Keep your wallet shut, sign nothing, say you don't speak the language. She said, what do I care about those guys? They're not looking out for me. I know who lives there, she said, and she pointed to insinuating driveways, raked gravel, money. She told her father she was easily coaxed into cars, at times even asking for it, waiting in obvious places for something to happen in bedrooms and bathrooms, at doorways with lots of traffic. She said, I can be dumb sometimes. I don't always know what I'm thinking. Look at the shoes she wore and the dresses. Mother's mother was still sewing flaps on the cups of the girls' brassieres so she would look flat, more boy-girl than girl, as if that were going to change things, as if there weren't other ways to do it. I know lots of ways, she said to her father. Look, she said, and she lifted up her shirt. Look at what the lawn did to my back. She showed her father something else that she had brought, but he said, no. Her father said, I don't feel like it today. T said, the shit you deal wears off too fast. "What do I care?" she said. "There are always men somewhere with money. I've got my grandfather, remember. I have my uncles." A friend of a friend had a place for them to go in a big enough town where a lot went unnoticed. But her father said, "No, I don't feel like it today." "No," her father said. "No, I have no place to keep it. Just let me kiss you," he said, which she did, arms crossed and eyes shut tight in the cold of the car. She moved a little closer to him and waited for the blow. Thank you. Thank you very much. This next story has some lift, I think. God knows, I hope it does. A happy rural seat of various view. This is the news story, so I'm a cheerful person. Lucinda's garden. They met Gordon Brisk on a Friday the 13th at the Clam Box in Brooklyn. They poo-pooed the ominous signs. The milky stew they ate was cold. So what? They were happy. They were at sea. They were at the mess, cork-skinned roughs and rummy spirits, dumb, loud, happy, and they really didn't have so much to say to each other. They were only a few months married and agreed on everything. And for the moment, nearly everything they did, where and how they lived, was cheap or free. They expected gifts at every turn and got them. So it was at the Clam Box on a Friday night, lime pits along the rim of the glass pie feeling puckered, when Gordon Brisk introduced himself as a friend of Aunt Lucinda's from a long time ago. Nick said he had seen Gordon's paintings, of course, and Gordon said, "I'm not surprised." Gordon told a story that included Aunt Lucinda when she was their age, young. There were matches in it and another young woman who almost died. Aunt Lucinda in the story was the same, all love, 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 and this time for Gordon. And as for Gordon himself, he held up his hands. His hands had been on fire. He said, "Just look at these fuckers." And they did. They looked and looked. The hands should have scared him, but they were drunk and sunburned and happy. They were glad, they insisted, glad to have met him. "Our first famous person," Pye said after the after-dinner drinks when she and Nick were in the Crosley driving home. Pye was driving too fast. She was saying how she loved those amber-colored oversweet drinks, the ones floated with an orange slice and a cherry. She had had too many. So was it any surprise she hit something? She hit what they thought was a raccoon. It was definitely something large and dark, but fatally hesitant. Pye was driving the Crosley, a gardener's mini car which had no business on a public road, but Pye had wanted to drive it. The Crosley was a toy, yet whatever Pye hit hobbled into the woods, dragging its broken parts. Home again and in their beds, Pye and Nick took aspirin and turned away from each other and slept. Next morning, fricked of love, and then as usual in the garden, Aunt Lucinda's garden, the famous one, a spilling over, often photographed seacoast garden. The garden was how they lived for free. They were the caretakers in an estate called the cottage. Some cottage. Why would Aunt Lucinda leave this paradise, they asked, but she had told them his name was Bruno and his wealth exceeded hers. The villa he owned in Tuscany was staffed. Everything here is arranged for my pleasure, so Aunt Lucinda said. Gordon had said, scant pleasure. He had said, I'll tell you pleasure, the killing kind. And then to most everyone at the clam box bar, he described his wife, shoe-black hair and pointy parts. That cunt was the source of the fire, or so he had said at the clam box. I was fucking around, was what Gordon had said, but who wouldn't? They were untested, Pye and Nick. They were newly everything, and now here they were caretakers for a summer before the rest of life began, and on this morning, as on so many mornings, the cloudless sky grew blue, then bluer, white ships of birds passed fast overhead, and the water was bright. They looked too long at its ceaseless signals, and at noon they zombied to it. They let the water assault them until cold and helpless, they let the waves knock them back to shore and up the beach. Sand caught in all the cracked places, and it felt good to take off their suits and finger it out. They lay directly on the sand, they dozed, they woke, they brushed themselves off. They wanted nothing. They were dry, and their suits were dry, and for a moment warm against them, and they walked to the shore. Nick and Pye walked along the shore and then into the water, and they knew the water all over again. So went the afternoon in light, no clouds, whereas indoors was dark. It was dark, but they ran through the mudroom toward the phone. They ran, and then they missed it. Who cared? They had the late afternoon before them. They tended the garden, Nick and Pye. They watered the deep beds. They flourished arcs. They beaded hooded plants and cupped plants and frangible roos. They washed paths. The wet rock walls turned into gems. What a place this was. How could Aunt Lucinda's Bruno match it? Of course, the sunsets could be overlong if all they did was watch them. But they were distracted. The hot showers felt coarse against their sunburned skin, and the lotion was cold. They put on pastel colors and saw their eyes in the mirror, another blue, another summer dusk. Stunned by the sun's garish setting, they stood close to the grill and the radio's news. They were in love and could listen, horrified but untouched, to whatever the newscaster had to say. But the flamboyant infanticide accomplished with duct tape was too much. Just north of them it had happened in the next and poorest count. "Turn that off," Nick said, and Pye did. For them, nothing more serious than the dark they finally sat in with plates on their laps, and at their feet melted drinks that looked dirty. Death. Will it be sudden, and will we be smiling? Will we know ourselves and the life we have lived? Don't even think such things. But Pye did, and Nick did too. He said, think of something else, and Pye came up with Gordon. Gordon at the clam box, his high color and his scribbled hair. The way he startled whenever they had swayed closer. Was he afraid he might be touched? But there were all those women, an actress they had heard of, a lot of other men's wives, Aunt Lucinda, a beauty, was what he had said of her. Cornelia Shelby had been a girlfriend too until the Count swooped down. A prick, the Count. Cornelia Shelby was a bitch. What are we? They'd asked. Conceited. Nevertheless, Gordon called them. The picnic was his idea. Mid-morning and already hot, the coast, a scoured metal, stung their eyes. Even as they drove against the wind, they felt the heat. There was no shade for a picnic. The tablecloth, cornered with rocks, blew away. The champagne was wavy. The food they ate was salty or dry. No tastes to speak of. Nick wanted peanut butter and jelly on pink, damp bread. Instead, here were cresses and colored crisps. Then the champagne began. Pie swallowed too much of an egg too fast, and it hurt her throat. Gordon said of Aunt Lucinda's Bruno, "The man's a fool. He knows nothing about art, but he lets people play with his money." Gordon picked at the knees of his loose khaki pants, and what he found he flicked away in the seagrass. He asked, "How do you play with yours?" They told him just how little they had. "Too bad," he said. "Poor you." Pie washed her sticky hands in the cooler's melting ice. Gordon yawned. Then they all three pushed the picnic back into the basket, didn't bother to fold, drove home. A storm the next day. The power thunked out. Nick and Pie still had a headache from the picnic, too much champagne and whatever they had drunk after, so they took more aspirin. They napped. They looked at the sky. They shared a joint, and they knocked around in bed and felt rubbed and eased when they were finished. It was quiet in the cottage, except for the sound of the rain. They talked about money until they made themselves thirsty. Downstairs on the porch, they saw Gordon in the garden under the tent of a golf umbrella. Gordon said he'd walked all the way from the village to them, walked in the rain to get sober. Last night, he said sadly. He shut the umbrella and sat on the porch with his head in his ruined hands. So they lit the fat joint, rolled against the threat of all-day rain, and Gordon was glad of it. "Yes," he said, and inhaled deeply and exhaled in a noisy way, seeming satisfied, which was how they felt too. Forgotten was the woozy picnic and the problems of money. After all, Nick and Pie were a handsome couple, young and loved. Aunt Lucinda was rich, even if they weren't. Hundreds of people had come to their wedding, and now they were caretakers to a scenic estate called the Cottage on Morgan Bay. For them, the sky cleared and the sun came out and the garden began to sizzle. Gordon stayed on. He watched the happy couple, swatted by the waves, how they exhausted themselves until he was exhausted too, and he slept. They all slept. They slept through the white hours of afternoon when the light was less complex. When they woke, the sand was peachy colored and the sky was pretty. Gordon said he wanted to do something, but what? Why didn't they have any money? They had the Crosley. Fun, Pie said. Some fun, Nick said. You killed some kind of an animal in that toy. Pie said I could bike to Gary's and see if he has any clams. We could have a clam bake. Down here, after 5, it's damp and cold, and there's not as much. You come up with something then, why don't you? The lotion's hot. It can't feel good, Gordon said, but Pie said he was wrong. I'm so sunburned. Anything against my skin feels cool, she said. Gordon wiped his hands on her breasts. He said, lovely. He said, maybe you'll think of something to do. I'll call you. A line they had heard before, had used themselves. I'll call you, augured disappointment. Nick's handsome face was crinkled. What the fuck, he said. What's this? Pi asked. You're more ambitious, was what Nick finally said. A cup of soup was dinner, the radio left off. Find some music, Pi said, and left Nick to wander through the cottage. She swatted Aunt Lucinda's clothes until she found it Valentino tap pants, and she tapped downstairs to nobody's music but her quavery own. The best you could do? Pi asked. Look at you, he said. On the beach, they agreed their daydreaming was sometimes dangerous. The memory of Gordon's misanthropic breath against their faces came in gusts. Jesus, Pi said, remembering. What? The hollows of her body, especially at her hips, were exciting to them both, and they smiled to see the sand running out of Nick's hand and into the ditched place between her hips. Jesus, Pi said. I was thinking, Nick said, I'd lick. Back to the garden, to the doused and swabbed every morning afternoon, Nick staked the droopers and Pi cut back the heavy-headed mock orange now past Pi hacked at and hacked until the shorn shrub looked embarrassed. Poor thing, Nick said, and Pi laughed. I've turned the grandpa of the front walk into a kid. Pi, a long girl, wobbly in heeled shoes, bow-legged, shifty, bored perhaps, but friendly, quick to laugh on any errand, making an impression. Nick left her on the village green the next afternoon, a lean girl in a ruffled bib. What was she wearing exactly? Something skimpy, faded, pink. She wore braids, again. Or that was how Nick remembered her when he described Elizabeth Latham Day. Pi was her father's invention. A girl, a pretty speck, a part of summer, and passing through it, she was. Pi was a white blonde, a blonde everywhere. It made Nick hard to think of her. She had close blonde fur between her legs. He liked to comb it with his fingers, pull a little bit. Fuck. Where the hell is she? Nick couldn't help himself. Lucinda said there was no family precedent. No one was mad that she knew of. Don't think we weren't getting along, Nick said. Quite the opposite. Dogs snuffed in the woods, off leashes. Heavy yellow and black dogs, their rheumy eyes mournful, their hard tails always looked wet and swapped against the shrubs. Once the dogs barked. Nick heard, though they were out of sight, something they had found dead and offensive. Not her, not Pi, thank God. Although, after the dogs, the reports, the calls, the case grew fainter. Also, Nick was drinking. He was forgetting he had this job. He found himself standing in front of open broom closets and cabinets in front of the dishwasher and sinks. Sometimes his hands were wet. He finished watering the wilted patches, then sat on the porch and worried his roughed-up hands, cut and dirty and uncared for, ugly as roots and clumsy, hard even to phone to push the buttons accurately, but he did, and to his surprise, Gordon Brisk answered and said, I'm only just home, but I've heard. I'm sorry. And that was that. What was this guy all about was what Nick wanted to know. Tell me, Nick said to Lucinda. Addresses, historic districts, the watch he wears, his antique truck. Gordon's conversation was an orange pricked with cloves, an aromatic keepsake of Episcopal Christmases. So it came as a surprise when he said he was a Jew. A Jew? You've not seen a lot of the world, Nick. true. He hadn't. He had married young. But Nick did not want to travel. He wanted to stay at the cottage at least until spring, maybe through another summer. Who knew Pie might come back? Why would Gordon say more? Nick and Pie hadn't seen him since when? That hot, flashy day Brisk discovered they only looked rich. They had money enough to get by, but how much was that? How much did it cost to get by pleasantly? They were young, newly married. The most expensive things they bought were medicinal, recreational. "You have no idea how happy we have been here," Nick said. This was the truth, uttered later, after whatever had passed for dinner, after the bath that made him sweat the third or fourth scotch. "We were really, really happy." The mothers and fathers on both sides of the family made visits. They remarked on the garden and the ocean. They said no one would leave such a place voluntarily. So Nick stayed on at the cottage. He watched the seasons redden, then blue, then brittle and brown the plants. The decline could be beautiful, but Nick's hands, ungloved, grew grotesque. A fungus buckled and yellowed his thumbnail. His hands, all rose nicks and dirt, reminded him of Gordon's hands. Gordon talking about something to do with love, saying they had no idea, speaking in his sear voice, the old pocked, vacant voice, prophesizing horrors they could not imagine. Not us, Pie thought, and Nick thought too. Weren't they always harmonious after Gordon left? They said, "We're lucky together." "We are." "You have no idea," Gordon had said another day on the beach. He had said to Nick, "Someday your mouth will bleed in your sleep, and her cunt too will stain whatever it touches." "Love?" Nick asked. Gordon in the buff on the beach that time, pulling at the bunched part between his legs, lifting up a purse of excitable skin. The black-haired, peaky creature called his wife had been a bitch. Gordon had said, "I was on my way home when I saw the smoke. Up in smoke, my wife and some of my paintings." Gordon had asked, "You know what I tried to save, don't you?" Nick had suspected it was not his wife. But what was Nick doing to find his? Why was it Gordon that Nick thought so much about when Gordon had shut up his house and gone somewhere southwest? Oh, the summer. The summer felt next door despite the cold. Nick talked to anybody. He shut the place up. He was there after last call at the bar, saying his goodbyes at the clam box, already shivering yet still polite. Likeable boy. It was a dry, cold, a snowless night, and Nick, so exposed in the Crosley, hurt driving into it. The starless sky was friendly, and the moon, if there was one, was wide. Thank you.